Okay, welcome back. So in this first section of the DVD, this is for my total beginners. If you're not a beginner, you know the names of the notes, you definitely want to press the next button on your remote. Now, if you're a total beginner or you want a refresher, here it goes. So the piano is like the alphabet, okay? So if you know the English alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You stop at G, okay? So we're using or borrowing the first 7 letters of the alphabet. And what's happening is they're just repeating themselves over and over again on the piano. Now, A is sort of like the beginning of our alphabet, right? It is the beginning of our alphabet in normal usages. But on the piano, C is sort of like that beginning, that start, that home base. We even divide our piano by calling this particular note right here, middle C, for example. So kind of transform that in your mind, that C is kind of sort of like that main note rather than A. Okay, so here's an easy way to remember the notes. Okay, there are 2 black keys. You see these 2 group black keys? And see these 3 group black keys? Remember that, because what the piano does is it repeats itself over and over again. So we're only dealing with 7 alphabet letters. Now those translate into 12 notes. They say, how does 7 translate into 12 notes? Well, you got the black keys. You got 5 black keys as well that you got to remember, but we're not going to talk about that yet. Let's talk about the 7 white keys. So C is right here. The way I teach my kid to remember this is it's the white key directly to the left or lower than the 2 group black keys. And don't worry, if you don't know what the 2 group black keys is, it don't matter. You're going to learn them soon. But C is to the left of that. Now, the way I remember F is to the left of the 3 black keys. So F is to the left of the 3 group black keys. So you got C on the left of the 2 black keys, F on the left of the 3 black keys, okay? So I got this little rap I do for my 3-year-old daughter, and it goes, C is on the left of the 2 black keys, F is on the left of the 3 black keys. C is on the left of the black keys. F is on the left of the black keys. Come on the left of the 2 black keys. F is on the left of the 3 black keys. And I know I'm being silly, but now all you do is fill in the blank. So the alphabet is the alphabet. You never change the order. So if C is on the left of the 2 black keys, well, you know your alphabet, right? What's after C in the alphabet? Well, D. So D is right in the middle of the 2 black keys, right next to C. So we got C, D. I know you know where we're going. E is the 3rd note right here. Okay, so we got C, D, E. F is on the left of the, you know it. What comes after F in the alphabet? G. Okay, so that's G. A. So G and A are kind of like right in the middle of the 3 black keys. You can look at them as that. And then what comes after A in the alphabet? B. And then you have C. Now, I got to go back to G and A because, you know, obviously G and A aren't next to each other in the alphabet. But at that point, that's when we start all over, okay? So we go from C to G, but then after G, we start back over and we go A, B, C, okay? So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now, here's the easy part, you guys. It just repeats itself all the way up the piano. So you got C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. At this point, we repeat D, E, F, G, A, B, C is on the left of the 2 black keys. Keep going. D, E, F, G, A, B, C is on the left of the 2 black keys. D, E, F is on the left of the 3, and you just keep going up the whole piano. Now, when I was first getting started, I don't know, we're talking 17 years ago now, I actually took a erasable marker and just wrote on the keys, you know. Mom got mad because I don't even know if it was erasable. It might have been permanent, but, you know, it's all right if you, you know, this is just material things. You can write something on it. Use one of those Crayola. They got the washable ones you can get to your kids. They write all over the walls. Get one of those if you're having a hard time and just write the notes out in the beginning. And when it wears off, that's when you should have memorized it. Don't rewrite it. If it wears off and you still need them, you got a problem. It should only be for the initial stages of folks who are just getting started. Okay, so you have the notes. Now, I want to explain something to you. Now, you probably heard the term sharps and flats, right? Sharps and flats. Now, most people say that sharps and flats are the black keys. That's partly correct. Sharps and flats aren't just really black keys. Okay, flat means to lower something. Sharp literally means to raise something. You got me? Repeat that after me. Flat means to literally lower something. Say flat means to lower and sharp means to raise. Flat means to lower, sharp means to raise. You got that? I'm into this Barney stuff right now. I gotta apologize to you, but you know, it helps. The rhythm helps. Okay, so if flat means to lower something, now on the piano, you tell me, what direction is lower? This direction? Am I getting lower or higher? I'm getting higher. So if that way is higher, then this way must be lower. So remember, flat is to move in this direction on the piano, lower. Sharp is to move in this direction, higher. So therefore, when you apply that concept to the black keys, it's crystal clear. Because if I'm here, now all I do is I take the same alphabet letter. I don't change the fact that this is a C, but I say, well, what happens if I raise C? Now, what is the name denoted for raising something? It's sharp. So I literally call this black key C sharp, which means C being raised. You get it? It's not hard to get. C is raised up, so we call it C sharp. Now, subsequently, this black key also has another name. We could call it a flat as well, but we can't call it C flat because C is not being lowered, C is being raised. But we can call this D flat, as in Dwayne. Why? Because D is here, but if you think about it, when we lower D, we get D flat, okay? So in essence, this black key has two names. It has a sharp name and it has a flat name. I guess you can think of it like maiden name versus marriage name or whatever they call it, or mama name versus daddy name. But there is a different role and there's a different reason for that we get into later on. But when D is lowered, we call it D flat. When C is raised, we call it C sharp, okay? So therefore, you should be able to figure out the other ones, because if you go to this note right here, when D is being raised, we call it D sharp. When E is being lowered, we call it E flat. So we can either call this D sharp or we can call this E flat. You do this one for me. You do this one for me. What can we call this? What is being raised here? What white key is being raised, or what alphabet letter is being raised? F. F is right here. That's F sharp or G flat, because G is being lowered in that case. So F sharp or G flat. G sharp or A flat. A sharp or B flat, okay? So that's all the names, and we repeat ourselves over and over again. So we pretty much go, we got C sharp or D flat here, D sharp or E flat here, F sharp or G flat here, G sharp or A flat here, A sharp or B flat here, and it's the same thing all the way up the piano. The same exact thing, okay? So piano is really not that intimidating, because really all you have to do is focus yourself on one area. Let's look at one area of the piano. Now let's just focus on this area right here, okay? C is here and C is here. Only difference in between them is their pitch. C is a little higher here than here, than here, but it's the same C, okay? So in playing sheet music, the only difference is that in sheet music, they tell you exactly what you're playing, right? They tell you exactly where to be. You know, whatever the sheet music says, you will know if you're supposed to play it up here or down here or down here. In playing by ear, you're free. You know, if you want to make a pretty song, you can play it up there. If you want it to be more deeper, you could play it down here. If you want it to be twinkle, twinkle, you can play it up here. But as in playing by ear, we know that it's the same thing. We know that, you know, it's D flat down here, D flat up here. You don't have to put that in sheet music for us because we just know. We know that those are the same thing, you know. So you know, playing by ear is a lot more free, improvising. Once you know the foundations, you know your notes, you know stuff like that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to something that is very fundamental, I think you need to know, and it's this concept of half steps versus whole steps in music. And it's a form of distance. In other words, we're moving. When we say half steps, something is moving. We're talking about distance and relationship between the notes, okay? So now you know all the notes. You know that there's 12 notes, right? You got the 7 white keys, you got the 5 black keys. They combine to give you this, what we call an octave. Okay, so between the low C and the high C directly in front of it, which is 12 notes away, that would be considered an octave. Between the D and the D, that would be considered an octave. E to E, that's considered an octave. E flat to E flat, that's an octave, okay? So anything you play within this octave, you can repeat it in this octave. You can repeat it up here. You can repeat it down here. You know, everything else is being duplicated pretty much. Just the same thing, lower in this case, higher in this case. So I could play this, I could play that there, or I could play it up here, or I could play it up here, or I could play it down there. So that's the idea of an octave. But now when we talk about whole steps and half steps, there's a little riddle that you need to memorize. And it goes like this. A half step is from key to key with no keys in between. A whole step always skips a key with one key in between. Say that with me. A half step, no, I mean really say it. Repeat after me. A half step is from key to key with no keys in between. In between. Okay, so a half step is from key to key, no keys in between. A whole step always skips a key with one key in between. So with that concept, what is the distance between C and D flat? What's going on here? A half step is from key to key with no keys in between. That would be considered a half step. What is the distance between this D flat and this E flat? Well, a whole step always skips a key with one key in between. So you saw how we had the black keys. Now you might have been thrown off a little bit because these look like they're next to each other. But when that poem talks about no keys in between and one key in between, we're talking white keys, black keys. We're not segregating. This is all the same melting pot here. So these technically have D in between them. So this is a whole step apart. What is the distance between this F and this G? What's the distance? Is it a half step or a whole step? If you're getting this, you should have said a whole step because of this black key in between. Okay, what about this B and C? Now you better be getting this because the quizzes in the Gospel Music Training Center are really gonna get you on this. You're not gonna pass it and be able to move on to the next level. So what is the distance here? Well, a half step is from key to key with no keys in between. Are there any keys in between B and C? So that would make it a half step. What about this? What about this E and F? Whole step or half step? Well, a half step is from key to key with no keys in between. That would make it a half step. What about this A flat and A? Well, that would be a half step because there are no keys in between A flat and A. How about C and E? Trick question. So now when we get beyond one note, when we get beyond that, well, you can still determine the amount of whole steps or half steps in between a bigger interval or distance. Okay, so before it was C to D flat, that's, a half step. Or it was F sharp to G, that's a half step. Or it was F sharp to G sharp, that's a whole step. But when we do bigger distances, you can still say, oh, that's 3 half steps apart. Or that's 5 half steps apart. You can do that. Now here's the conversion. You know how when we were back in school and they said this many ounces equal this many liters, and I still don't understand that stuff, but I understand music. Okay, it's the same thing. 2 half steps equal 1 whole step. Okay, so you can express the distance between 2 keys one of 2 ways. If it's greater than 2 half steps, you could just say it's a whole step apart. If it's not greater than a whole step, it's only one note, one note is from key to key, you have to say half step. Or you could say half a whole step, but you would just say half step. But let's just say it's 4 half steps in between. Well, you could either say 4 half steps or you could say 2 whole steps, because it takes 2 half steps to equal 1 whole step. You get that? Simple math, right? So in that case, if we go back to our piano, what's the distance between C and E? Well, let's count it. C to D flat is 1 half step, right? It's a half step. D flat to D is another half step. So now we're at 2 half steps total. D to E flat is another half step. So now we're at 3 half steps total. And E flat to E is 4 half steps, the last half step. Okay, so basically the distance between C and E is 4 half steps. Now, how would you equate that when you're looking at it in terms of whole steps? You just do simple math. Well, if it's 4 half steps and 2 half steps make 1 whole step, then this would be either 4 half steps or 2 whole steps. It's that simple, right? And I could say that, that C and E are 2 whole steps apart or 4 half steps apart. What is the distance between F and A? You tell me. You do it first. Okay, you got 5 more seconds to figure this out. Well, let's do the math. F to F sharp is a half step. F sharp to G is another half step. We're at 2 now. G to G sharp is another half step. And right now, I'm just randomly using names of notes. I'm not being strategic or anything. So sometimes I might say G sharp. Sometimes I might say A flat. And I'm no particular reason at this point. And this last one, from G sharp to A, that's the 4th half step. So F to A is 4 half steps or 2 whole steps. And here's the thing. Whenever something has the same amount of distance between it, it's of the same kind. Just remember that. So if this F and A, it had how many half steps? Do you remember? It had 4 half steps, right? Do you remember what this C to E had? It had 4 half steps. So if you remember my rule, anything that has the same distance is of the same kind, from the same family, in the same group or whatever, in the same fraternity, they are alike, right? That means they're the same kind. Do you hear a similarity between this FA? How does it make you feel? Does it make you feel happy? And do you hear that same kind of feeling? Even though it's a totally different note, yeah, it's going to sound different because it's a different note, but do you get that same kind of feeling? Do you get that? Okay, same kind of feeling. So that's just a little glimpse into the future for you. So now you have whole steps and half steps out of the way. Now I want to cover a concept of 12, okay? 12. 12 is a very important number in music because, as you already know, there's how many notes on the piano? Unique notes, letter notes. There's 12, right? And now every note, I guess you could say, is like a planet. It has its own world to be concerned with. So when someone's singing, like your favorite singer, like a gospel singer, Aretha Franklin, or somebody singing, at any given time, they're in a particular universe. You got that. At any given time, you can't be in 2 keys at one time. So, you know, even if you're a little musically inclined, you would know somebody would say, yeah, such and such is in the key of C. That's like being on planet C. You're in that world. Everything is going to be tuned up to that world. Everything revolves around that world. Now, so-and-so may be in the key of F at a different point, you know, or in another song. Now everything is centered around that world. So in other words, the world, they work together, but everything works together in whatever world you're in. So when you're in the key of C, you're going to have certain things going on. You're going to have certain chords. You know, you're going to have certain things going on. Okay, that's in the key of C. But when we go over to another planet, we could do that same thing, but we're going to be in another world and we're going to do other chords in that particular key. Okay, so I was in the key of F then. Don't try to look at what I'm doing. I'm just explaining the concept. You know, if I was in the key of D, now I'm in another planet, you know? It's the same movement, but don't you hear the difference? You hear the difference, but you hear the similarities. It's the same idea, but I'm taking it to another planet. So, or another major key is the technical way to say it. So there's 12 of those. So throughout this course, you're going to be hearing that, you know, if I'm going to play a major chord, which is something you'll be learning soon, I can play that in all 12 planets. Every planet has a major chord. Every planet has a minor chord. Every planet has a diminished chord. Every planet has a dominant chord. Anything you can do on one planet, you can do on the other planet or the other major key. Okay, remember that. That's why when I showed you the 4 half steps, we were in one planet when we did it, you know, C to E was 4 half steps, but I took you to, you know, F and A, it was in another planet, but at the same time, we could hear that they were the same thing. They were the same distance. We could hear that happy feeling. So that concept is something very important. Remember, 12, 12, 12. And everything you want to learn in music, you want to learn it in 12s. You know, especially gospel musicians. A lot of gospel musicians, we're handicapped. We don't know how to play in all 12 keys. We mastered 3 planets. We sent men to the moon, but we haven't mastered the rest. You know, we stopped at Jupiter, you know. And, you know, I know it seems like a crazy analogy, but remember those planets. You want to be a master of all 12 of these major keys, all 12 of these worlds. So if you learn a cool chord in GMTC, take the time, you know, at your leisure to learn it in all 12 keys, a concept you're going to learn in this musician transformation collection.